Welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about preseason conditioning. So, up here in Nebraska, we just had a foot of snow here at my house. And although we've had a pretty mild winter, some of you may have not had such a mild winter, and the horse might have had some time off. You might have some time off. And so we thought this would be a great time to dive into this subject. Now, Destri lives in balmy Oklahoma, and so he probably doesn't have as much time off in the winter. Tell us about what winter looks like for you. Do you get to ride much? Do you still rope a lot?
Anytime that it's sunny and 50 to 65, we're riding down here. And so that is a major change of moving down here compared to Nebraska. I mean, there's stuff to go to within an hour of my house about anytime you want to go to it. And you can train year round. And when I lived in Nebraska growing up, I would get my horses kicked out for the winter and then get them up in February, March, and start conditioning them and stuff like that. So it's it's quite a bit different.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when you can train year round or ride year round, that provides some different challenges too, because you can overdo it sometimes too. So they don't get necessarily a built-in rest break. Do you guys ever do like a scheduled, like I'm just going to give this horse, X amount of time off, or do you just look at how they're feeling and evaluate from there?
Yeah, that's pretty tough for us because all our horses do both events. And so we look at what events do we have coming up, how hard are we going to go, and try to prioritize it that way. So I know when I'm going to be really busy at work, say, or we're not, or we're going to be traveling for family stuff, our horses do get quite a big break in December and early January. I don't go as much. And that's a good time for me to focus on a young horse or a horse that's coming up and let my good ones take a break and bring those
Mhm.
other ones along. So that's usually what I do. When I'm giving my good horse a break, I'm trying to bring something else along behind it and give it more reps and stuff like that. And down here, we're set up great for that with the jackpots that you can go to all the time. It's pretty easy to get one seasoned and bring them along.
Sometimes I wish I was down south.
Well, come on, come visit anytime.
Yep. Well, let's see after Gracie graduates. I might just become a gypsy at that point. So,
There you go.
yeah. So, okay. So, as we're diving into equine conditioning, whether you've had to take a break from uh, going because of the weather, maybe your horse got hurt, maybe you got hurt, um, bringing them back or bringing yourself back, very, you know, you can follow a very regiment schedule, or like many of us used to do, we just get on and go, and I'd like to think there that we're providing a little more science and research and knowledge behind how we do things now. I've made a couple Facebook posts about like my 8 to Great program, basically starting out slow, and over 8 weeks, you are getting this horse ready to go back to competition. And that's barring that there's no injury that you're coming up from. Um, if there's an injury, then we want to take a lot more time to do that. And so, and Destry, you have some more sports specific types of conditioning that also entails, like for the team or open horse, things like that. Do you want to dive into some of that? Like how many weeks before they start doing more sled work or hot heels or heel-o-matic things?
Yeah, I think the most important part about that, and you nailed it, is progression and proper progression. And I think at the start of anything, whether it's you or your horse, you have to set goals of where you want to be and at what time you want to be at that level. So you have to build up their wind, their strength, and really conditioning a horse and horsemanship go hand in hand because whenever you're doing sport specific type training, you're talking about speeding up, slowing down, going lateral, going backwards, and things like that to try to keep them in your hand and doing those movements that they're going to be doing at a high rate of speed. So that's the most important part is having your horse have the buttons that you need during that time and then being able to train those movements for them so they're building the right muscles.
100%. Yeah. And I think it's like you said, it's great to work on the horsemanship side of things, and getting your horse more broke during that time. You can, depending on how your horse is housed, whether they're on pasture or they're in a run or they're in a stall, you really have to think about how does that play into that preconditioning. If they're out on pasture and they're getting a lot more free range or free movement, they're going to have a little bit more mobility, maybe not be as deconditioned as one that is stalled most of the time. And so I think it's important, like when I get on, I do try to walk for the first few minutes, and that's just basically getting those joint fluids moving, getting my horse connected to me. Phil Haugen says it best, we're trying to get them to use the thinking side of their brain instead of the reactive side of their brain. And so are we, I'm going into a lot of lateral flexions, I'm going into a lot of one rein stops, I'm backing up. Every time I stop, I do with my horse big, I do a one rein stop when I stop most of the time. And I make sure that his feet are not moving anymore and that he's soft on that bridle rein. And so that just also, not only does it get him thinking about me and what I'm doing, but it helps his body get warmed up and acclimated. We do that at a walk, we do that at a trot, and we just take a lot of time to slowly warm up those muscles and work on my connection with him, my feel, my timing, my balance. Do you have a similar warm up? How do you usually warm your horses up when you first get on?
Yeah, I agree. I start with walking and then trotting them both ways, loping both ways, making sure they're in the correct leads, trying to make sure they're collected and working their core, using their butt up under them, and just preparing those muscles. I might have them move laterally off my leg and counter arc, and then have them face since I'm primarily a header, and just work on some of those movements to make sure they're paying attention and are fully stretched out and moving those areas they need to move.
Now, I want to go back to something you said. You are a team roper and you work in both leads. I can't believe that.
Yeah, and crazy, crazy to think about that.
But,
Yeah.
so talking about that though, sometimes ropers don't like to lope their horse in the right lead because they don't want them switching leads. Is that kind of the theory behind that? Or do you know?
Well, to each their own on that deal. I mean, you'll see calf ropers primarily lope right circles and stuff like that. But I think it's important to go both ways and make sure that their legs are warmed up and warming up all the muscles that you can to get them where they need to be.
I agree. And then you help your horse be more symmetrical. I
Yeah.
feel like if we
Yeah.
only lope on one lead or we only go to the left or whatever, you're going to create asymmetries in your horse, and they already have a tendency to want to be more one-sided than the other. And so I think it's our job to keep them more symmetrical, just as it is to keep ourselves more symmetrical
I
too.
agree. And you just have to be intentional about your warm up and be using your warm up as maybe you're doing some injury prevention type stuff in your warm up with your horse. And that's an easy way to build it in if you're going to ride them every day. Just build stuff into your warm up that's going to help them and then make sure that you have a proper cool down at the end. And I know that myself, sometimes I'll miss that, especially if I'm riding multiple horses. It's hard to focus on a good cool down for one horse and then go get on another one.
I agree. A lot of times we get in a hurry and we just tie them up to the fence and jump on that other one, and that's their cool down, stand there. Which, if you are bringing a horse back from injury, or you have a horse that is more susceptible to soreness or things like that, I think that cool down is a great time to, it's like an insurance policy, to help prevent them, um, to get, help prevent them from getting more sore. Yesterday, I think I had a perfect example of a cool down. So it wasn't necessarily with my horse, but it was with myself. So the girls and we've decided to train for a half marathon. And I don't know why at 50 years old, I think this is a good idea. But because when I turned 40, I considered it and I thought, oh, heck no, I don't want to do this on my 40th birthday. But now I guess I'm 10 years older and it's going to be a good idea. But anyways, last night I ran 5 miles when I got home from work. And well, let me clarify. I walked and ran 5 miles last night. But after I got done, I took a long time stretching because my muscles were warm and I did not want to be hurting today. And I knew that it was further than I had went before. And so I got back home. I did a lot of stretching of my hip flexors, my quads, my low back, because when I hit mile 4, I could really start feeling all of those things. And so this morning, I don't hurt. So I think if we can translate that to the horse, is, if you have a horse that has a tendency to be a little stiff, maybe they don't track up under themselves as well. When you're watching them travel, their hind feet should land in their front feet tracks. And if they're a little short on that, then they're tight somewhere. And so I think after we get done, if we can take a few minutes and do some stretches with them while their muscles are warm, it makes such a huge difference with them. What are your thoughts on that? I know I'm kind of all over the place here, but.
So I didn't used to be a big treat guy, but then I got party girl and she likes them. And so I like to make her work for that treat and do her stretches left, right, between her legs, stuff like that. And then also I'll scratch up under her belly, get her to arch her back and stretch those muscles out in her back, and just simple stuff like that that really can go a long way, but may seem like a simple thing at the time.
Yep, I agree. And we have a variety of types of horses. We have Stevie, who is she's a smooth guy, so she's kind of chunky. We call her a little chunky monkey, a little glazed donut, and she when we moved and they are now in runs, so they get some activity, but not as much activity as they did when they were out in the pasture. She kind of got a little bit bound up, and Gracie would get on her and she'd say, Mom, she just doesn't feel right on the right. And when you'd watch her travel, she didn't really reach up under herself like she should. And so we took this winter, and Gracie, bless her heart, being a 16-year-old girl, most kids don't want to stretch their horse. Most people don't want to stretch their horse, but Gracie really did. Every time she got done riding, she would stretch her. And that mare now is more symmetrical when you watch her move. She's more fluid in her movement. And that is just, that isn't your joint injection. That isn't, just medicating them. It just takes some good old fashioned hard work and elbow grease, basically. And she has improved her quality of movement tremendously. So I think an ounce of prevention is definitely worth a pound of cure on these horses and keeping them healthy for sure.
I agree. We preach that with our athletes all the time: recovery, stretching. and a proper warm up and being intentional in the warm up. And so it's definitely a good thing to translate to your horses. And going back to speed transition, being able to smoothly transition from a walk to a trot to a lope and then all the way back down, you're working accelerators, you're working decelerators, and different types of muscle fibers that way. And so it's good to be able to let your horse go through those and work those muscles, but also, again, horsemanship, having them be able to do it correctly.
Mm-hmm. And having it in a controlled manner and not just, doing those speed control things and expecting them to happen when you're out there competing. How many times do you go to an event and everybody's just loping mindless circles? They're just doing it because that's what everybody else is doing, And sometimes there's not a lot of room, but why would you change your warm up when you get to your event to be different than what you do at home? And again, I'm gonna quote Phil because like he's my hero, but Phil talks about horses don't like surprises. And if your horse has a lot of anxiety when you get to an event because they're asked to give their life every time they run, and they get to the event and then you start doing something different than what you do at home, that immediately triggers a reaction or some anxiety. So it's so important when you get to your event to do those same kinds of warm-ups that you do at home. And then the horse will be like, hey, we're in a different spot, but this is what we do at home. So I can relax a little more because the only change here is where we're at. But Becky's doing the exact same thing we do at home. Destri's doing the exact same thing we do at home. And so we had a horse that was really reactive and she was a pain in the butt to warm up. But as soon as I started doing the same things at home as I did when we got to the event, she was like a totally different horse to warm up. She was like she was at home. Have you had any experience in that, Destri?
I think it's important to have a routine, and you find comfort in that routine. And I was listening to Tyson Durfee talk and how when you're doing your warm up, you're preparing yourself mentally as well. And that's very important to keep the same routine. It develops confidence in your horse, confidence in yourself, and like your old season horses, they'll know what you're going to do next before you even ask them to do it. And that's when you know that you have built a good foundation into them to prepare them for competition. And then it's almost like they know they're ready after they do that last thing. Like, okay, now we're about to go get in the box, or we're about to go get in the holding pen. And they just know that it's time.
Yep. Yep. And you're developing that feel with them, that routine, that feel, that familiarity. And that doesn't happen overnight for sure.
No. It's part of seasoning. That's always fun.
Yeah. It is. Seasoning is not for the faint of heart.
No.
No, it will really work on your confidence. I heard a quote last night. As I was running, I kind of listened to stuff that basically keeps me grinding, I heard a quote last night, like, don't link your confidence to your ability. What it talked about was linking your confidence to your intention. And I really liked that because we can go to an event and have things be an absolute shit show, like it can go to heck. But if your confidence is linked to your outcome, well, then you come out of there and you are deflated and you're like, why am I doing this? You want to go kick the dog when you get back to the trailer, kick the tire. What you see is a lot of yanking on the horse, things like that, because people are disgusted with what happened out in that arena. But if you try to link your confidence to your intention, like before I go in the gate, I like to think about, okay, I have to drive up deep into the hole at second barrel so I don't tip. I have to, make sure my horse's shoulder is. I only try to think about like one thing as I'm going through the gate. And if I accomplish that one thing, no matter what the outcome of my run was, whether I'm in the 1D, the 2D, I crash all three barrels, whatever, if I accomplished what I intended to do, then that helps build my confidence. And so, I think having that mind shift of what is your intention for that run, what's your goal for that run, I think that'll really help in that seasoning process. Like when you're on a young horse, you're not probably going to go out there and win the thing, but what's your intention for that?
I agree. You can't compare yourself to everybody else's there and be doing what they're doing in the practice pen. And when I first came down here, everybody, they like to reach, they like to go really fast, and that's not overly my game. I like to use my horse and score, and I don't really like to reach a whole lot unless I absolutely have to and the situation demands it. So you have to just play to your strengths, play your game, trust yourself, and let the rest take over, the muscle memory and everything else like that.
Yeah, 100%. And if you've done your work ahead of time, you're going to be more confident going there. Like I know if I go to an event and I haven't been able to practice or haven't been able to, do the work ahead of time, I know I'm not nearly as confident running through that gate as I am when I've done the work, and same thing, like when you're bringing a horse back from an injury, that is a really scary time. The first time you compete on that horse after they've been hurt, so I think one way to help that confidence as you bring them back is doing the work, making sure you have prepared them. And then you're still going to have a little anxiety running through the gate or backing in the box if that horse has been hurt. But when you've done all that you need to do to get that horse ready, then you just have to trust in that process and that confidence in what you've done. So definitely helps with the mental side of things.
I agree. And you just have to show them that they're going to be okay when they go to do that thing again. And it's the same thing with athletes. We build them from certain drills all the way up to full contact. And so the same thing with a horse. You can't just go full contact, running the fastest steer, going Mach 90 in the barrels. You have to build them up slow, trotting the pattern, loping the pattern, cruising through, maybe getting some exhibitions, things like that. So you can build confidence in them and build confidence in yourself again with them and getting with your horse again.
Yeah. And you see a lot of horses that, maybe they're running up the fence or, they're doing, a rope horse, maybe there's a lot more anxiety in the box. They get really bad in the box because they're anticipating that pain. And I think performance issues in the arena, a lot of people say, well, you can't train out of pain. You can't. But I think like when a horse is having issues, let's say they're running up the fence, there's something that's going on that creates them to brace, cause anxiety, things like that. I think, identifying the pain and then working through that. But then, like you said, you have to bring them back slowly. And then you do have to retrain them so that they gain that confidence that they're not going to hurt when they go to turn that barrel or when they go to turn that steer. So there's multiple aspects to, retraining a horse after they've been hurt or getting them out of a bad situation, a bad habit that they've developed to avoid the pain. So I think that was a really good point you brought up.
I had to change my mentality because growing up, we'd take them to the pasture, we'd ride hills, we'd gather cows, we'd do things like that. Well, now I have a full-time job. I don't have access to those things. So now I have to focus on conditioning my horse more. And the more time you spend with your horse, you can feel when they're off or not. And you can know when something's uncharacteristic of them, whether it's a gait issue or they're acting funny in the box and stuff. It's not always, people get that old school mentality of, oh, they're just acting up or things like that. Well, a lot of time, that it's not in their character to do that. And so now my mind goes to, and my wife has obviously helped me with this, being around the barrel racing world so much more, is, man, maybe they don't feel right. Maybe they feel off. And so then you get them out and move them around. And, oh, yeah, they're pretty stiff here. Watch them walk and they look stiff in their hips. And then you go get them worked on and they're a completely different horse. And so I think it's also good to keep them tuned up that way, getting them worked on, keeping them loosened up, making sure their hips are moving, because those are their main drivers in a lot of these events. And so if they're getting on their front end and that's not characteristic of them, maybe they're stuck in their hind end and you need to get them loosened up. I know one time I was bringing a young horse along. He's a really good colt and had a really good mind. And so we're going through the training process, and they all kind of go through this anxiety where they don't really know what they're doing in the box. And then all of a sudden they figure it out, and then they kind of get amped up and you got to bring them back down. Well, one day he was just real ratty in the box, and I didn't have a good explanation for why that was. And so I was like, man, I got the feeling on him and everything else. I'm like, maybe he's just sore. Maybe I've been going too hard on him, and maybe he needs a break or something. But we had our horse chiropractor there, so I had him look at him, and he was pretty locked up. I rode him in the box the next day, and he didn't do a thing. He stood there like a shot dog the rest of the time. And so just little things like that, pay attention to them and don't just write them off as, they're mentally having a bad day. Maybe they're physically trying to tell you something. They'll tell you in a different way. And some horses will just push through pain. We have our Buxy mare. She just pushes through everything. And you really have to know her. And with her, it was a speed change. She didn't feel like she was firing as hard. And so that's when I could pick up on, all right, something, she's not feeling right somewhere. We need to figure this out.
Yeah. And I think that is so important. Like, the more you know your horse, palpate your horse. You've got to feel them. I have a video on our Teachable website. So it's pivotpoint.teachable.com, and it's injury screening. And so basically, if you don't really know like how to palpate your horse, or where, like, let's say they're sore, you notice you're poking around on them, you notice that they're sore down where their neck ties into their shoulder. What does that mean? You maybe don't really necessarily need to know what that means, but know that, know your horse, feel around on your horse, and then make sure you're telling your vet or your chiropractor or whoever you're working with, your physical therapist, that, hey, I noticed that my horse is sore when I poke here. And that injury video, that injury screening tool that I have, it does kind of give you an idea. Okay, if they're sore in that spot in their neck and their shoulder, this could correlate to neck pain. It could correlate to foot pain. Things like that kind of gives you an idea, like, okay, this might be an issue. Maybe you need to talk to your farrier about it, and things like that. So, but I think you bring up a really good point of, you need to know your horse. So palpate them on a regular basis so that when there's been a change in them. And so whether you notice it when you're brushing them, things like that, but literally it takes less than 30 seconds to really palpate most places on your horse to know, okay, they're sore here, they're not sore here. And then do that on a regular basis as you're trying to work through, whether you're stretching them, whether you're, massaging them, or just going, taking them to the chiropractor. It really doesn't take very long for you to keep an eye on those things. And I think that's what I appreciated when I did more inpatient rehab of horses, like to be able to get them back to work and then be palpating them the whole time, so I could see if they'd start to develop soreness. And I felt like I had kind of an advantage over a layperson bringing their horse back, because if I started to notice a little bit of soreness, then I could go right into some of my therapeutic modalities that could help them with that soreness. So if you are rehabbing your horse at home, trying to bring them back and conditioning them, and you notice a change in your palpation, of that horse, you notice that they're starting to get sore, then definitely be visiting with your vet or some equine healthcare provider to be able to get them the help they need. Because you and I, if we get sore from our preconditioning workout, we can talk to a healthcare provider. Our horses can't. And so they are trying to tell us some way, somehow, whether it's a lack of performance or they're sore when we palpate them. So we just have to be smart enough to listen to them, I think.
I agree. And you have to pay attention to, just because they hurt in one place, that doesn't necessarily mean that that pain is coming just from there. Maybe they're off somewhere else, and that's putting a lot of pressure on that place that they're acting sore. Just like people, just because your back hurts, that doesn't mean that it's just your back. It could be your hips. It could be the way you stand on your feet. There's a lot of different things that go into where and why a person hurts, and you have to investigate all those areas, and the horse is no different.
Yep. And are you playing a part of that horse's pain? We talked about that a little bit last time with that rider, with those rider evals, and how much a difference in how you sit on your horse can also play a part of that pain. And so that's our shameless plug for getting horse and rider evals done. So we're going to be rolling out some packages or some, we're still working out the details on that, but we really want to team up with you and get your horses evaled, get you as a rider evaled, and see how those things are working together or working against each other. So any final thoughts on that, Mr. Destri?
No, I mean, how you balance on your horse, whether you're balancing on their face or you're leaning left or right at full speed or just in general, or if you're sitting to one side or the other, it really does affect them. And so that's why it's so important to address yourself along with your horse.
I agree 100%. Shall we wrap it up and use one of your famous taglines?
Yes. Today's tagline is, health is not a destination, it's a way of life.
I love it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Join us next time as we discuss some recovery options.